It's, playing live is like a drug, and I feel like I'm going through withdrawal, but but it'll come back, and it'll happen. It's not gone forever. It's something I keep telling myself, and I keep reiterating in interviews, because I want to remind the world that too, like, just everyone be patient, and it will come, and it'll all be good.
Hi everybody, I'm Yasmin. I'm here with Taylor Momsen of The Pretty Reckless for the latest in Enemies in Conversation series. Thank you for joining me, Taylor. How are you? How have you been keeping in lockdown?
I'm good. Thank you for having me. How are you holding up?
As good as one can be in a lockdown. I've tried to do... Have you had this phase of lockdown when you've done like the lockdown hobbies? I tried to bake bread. I've done it all. I've knitted a blanket, so I don't know what to do anymore.
I feel you. I've learned how to record myself at home badly. I still work a computer, so I do it with my little Tascam 8-track recorder. Analog, battery powered. That's how I roll. I've hit the end of Netflix, which is like my joke now. I didn't know that was possible, but I'm out of television. So I'm not resorting to old shows that I call comfort television, just lots of comedies and things that I've seen a million times. And then now just like lots of press. So just trying to keep up to date. Especially this past week, I was saying I didn't know it was possible to be this busy and not leave my house.
So today we're talking about your new album, Death by Rock and Roll. February 12th it comes out. So this album will follow up from your last release in 2016, and it came at quite a turbulent time in your lives. I wondered, how was it going into this album? Was the process any different? How did it start?
Well, that's a loaded question. We went through, there's no way to you mentioned a turbulent time in our lives, and it was quite rough there for a minute. We went through a lot of loss. We lost a lot of people, kind of one after the other, starting with Chris Cornell. We were on tour with Soundgarden, opening for them, which was just the most amazing experience. And to have it end so tragically was heartbreaking and shocking and devastating, and all the words that go along with that. It came at I was not, it was so stunning that I was not emotionally equipped to handle that, I don't think. And so we were in the middle of a touring cycle with Who You Selling For when that happened, and I came to the realization that I was not in a great place to be public, and so I left tour. I went home to try to kind of regroup and process what had happened. And as soon as I started to kind of get my feet back on the ground and started to kind of move forward, I'd written a few songs, and I was calling our producer Kato, and I was like, let's get in the studio. We got to do something. I don't know if this is for a record or for what, but let's, start the process of moving forward. And as soon as we started to kind of put those plans in motion, I got the phone call that Kato died in a motorcycle accident. And that was really the nail in the coffin for me, I guess, for lack of a better phrase, where I sunk very, very down. I went into this very, very dark place into just depression and substance abuse, and just this very, very dark black hole of a mental state. And I didn't really know how to get out of it. And I didn't really know if I wanted to. I kind of hit a point where I kind of just gave up on everything. I gave up on life. I kind of didn't see the point anymore. And to make a very long story short of dealing with all of that and everything I went through, it was music. I know it sounds really cliche, but it was rock and roll that really saved my life. I eventually turned to the thing that's always been there for me. I turned to music. I started at the beginning again, because that's the only thing I knew how to do. So I started with the Beatles. I started listening to all the Beatles records and all the Beatles demos and, the anthology and everything. And that eventually led to listening to all the other, bands that I love and I've mentioned, which eventually led to me being able to listen to Soundgarden again without falling apart. And that eventually led to me picking up a guitar and just starting to play songs again, just for the fun of it, which eventually led to me starting to write. And this album, I think, is very different in a lot of ways from our previous records, in the sense that I really didn't have to try to write this album. It kind of, if anything, I probably tried not to. It kind of poured out of me in this in a way that I can't really describe. Like it just, one day it just kind of all overflowed, and the writing of this record and the creation of this record, I really credit it to the reason that I'm still here, and the reason that I'm, alive today. Not to sound super dramatic, but I really hit a point where I had to kind of make a conscious decision of death or move forward, and I chose to move forward. So I really consider this album a rebirth in a lot of ways, personally and as a band. It really feels almost like the first album again. So something that it's very obviously very near and dear to my heart, but something that I'm also just extraordinarily proud of, and my kind of my humble opinion. I think that we really made something special, and I think it might be our best album yet. So I'm really excited that it's finally coming out. I just threw a whole lot of information at you really fast.
No, that's fine. You mentioned a lot of things that I wanted to touch on. Obviously, this album came at a great time of pain, both the passing of Chris Cornell of Soundgarden and your longtime friend and producer, Kato. Having to rehash all of that stuff. You mentioned it was very cathartic for you, but I wondered, when after all of this did you first go into the studio and think, right, it's time to talk about this. It's time to get it all out on the table and process this?
Well, I think the starting of the processing of it came in the writing. I mean, I don't write in the studio. I write at home by myself, and once I have a collection of songs that I'm proud of, then I figure out how we're going to record. And this time around, we had never made an album without Kato before. So once I had written the record, it was this whole other kind of hurdle to figure out how to overcome of how the hell do we do this? Like, we've never done this without him before. And we were very kind of lost. And luckily I knew one other person who's a very dear friend of mine who I've known for years. Who's just a fantastic engineer and legitimately like the nicest, kindest person you've ever met in your entire life. And great producer. His name's Jonathan Wyman. And so I called him and I said, hey, I have these songs, and would you be interested in helping us recording these and helping us make this, and not really with any intention of even necessarily putting it out, just kind of it was something that I really needed to get out. So that's kind of how it started, and then it turned into a very long long process of trying everything and figuring it out. And I really have to give John a lot of credit, just because he was very understanding of the situation that we were in, and the kind of he's just very supportive of the fact that there was good days and then there was very, very bad days. It's the healing, there is no formula to healing, and so we're figuring it out as we went. And he was just very understanding and open to that, and he kind of allowed us to be the train wrecks or whatever you want to call it that we were at the time, which I think was really necessary. And I think that you can really hear that in this record, like that there was no faking anything or manipulating anything. It was very raw emotion, just being recorded, which I think makes for a very unique album.
It's interesting you talk about this album to great length about the really hefty emotional themes of it, I'll say. And even in the first track, like you said, you can hear that raw emotion. It feels like a roller coaster, because you talk about how you want to go, and it is very badass, with a shotgun with a lady on her back. But when you really look into it, there's a lot of morbid themes there. And I wonder, was it hard for you delving into these morbid themes at such great length without falling into existential dread or a depression? Like, how did you balance that without getting too sucked in?
I was already sucked in. I think that's really the answer. I was very low. I was very, very down. And when writing it, so by the time we got to recording it was me starting to come out of that hole. So there's no avoiding it, it's life. And so I think that, I realized that at some point of, I can't hide from this. So the only thing I can do is do what I've always done, which is, attempt to write about it and, hope that helps me start to heal. And it really did. you said the word morbid, and yes, there's a lot of kind of, dark and heavy themes to this record just due to, circumstance and everything that we went through. But I see this album, especially now looking back on it, we finished it over a year ago. I see it as a very hopeful record. Death by Rock and Roll, the song, even though it might sound very, very morbid and very dark just due to the title alone, it's actually that, that came from a place of that phrase, that line, Death by Rock and Roll, was something that Cato used to say all the time. It was an ethic, and it was a lifestyle code of how we've, since when we formed the band, it was this thing that we lived our life by, of death by rock and roll, of live life your own way, go out your own way, don't let anyone tell you differently, freedom, rock and roll till I die. It might come across as, very depressing. To me, it's actually, it's very much a battle cry for life. So I think that this album was probably the first record that I had titled before I had all the songs, because when he passed, that phrase just kept ringing in my head over and over. It was just very, very relevant again. If you listen to the album in full and you actually listen to it in the order that we presented, and pay attention to the track listing, that was very important to me. I mean, it always is on every record, but in this one in particular, it starts very kind of heavy and almost bleak and dark, and about halfway through the album there's this kind of musical shift where you start to realize that there is light at the end of the tunnel and there is hope, and if you listen to the album in full, I really feel like it is a very kind of full circle journey and a very full circle story that is obviously very personal to me. But if you take it out of context from my own life and just listen to it as a listener, I hope that there's a lot of content and a lot of things on it that can relate to you and yourself, because it's not, I always say, once the album's released, it no longer matters what it was about to me. Like, my point of view of it is irrelevant at that point. It's all that matters when I'm creating it. And then as soon as it comes out into the world, it only matters what it means to you and how you relate it to your own life. And if you can connect to it in some kind of grand way, the way that I've connected to, all the records that I love, and it doesn't matter to me what they were, what the writer was actually speaking about in their own personal life. It matters how I see it and how I relate it to myself and how it makes me feel. So it's always this kind of strange feeling when an album is about to come out, because it's something that's been so yours and you hold so dear and it's so precious. And then once you put it out into the world, I always say it's like a kid or something. Like you're sending your kid off to college and you're going, well, I hope I raised you well, like do me proud. So it's, it comes with a flux of emotions, but mostly just exciting. Like I'm really, really proud of this album, and I'm just really excited that everyone's going to be able to hear it now finally.
So this album features a lot of amazing collabs. You've got your collab with Matt and Kim of Soundgarden. I wondered how you went about that. Why did you want to reach out to those guys and work with them?
Well, I love them. I mean, I've loved them for a very long time. I mean, I love what they do. I love what they bring to the table. I mean, they're unparalleled musicians. But I love them as people. I mean, we became fairly close after everything that happened, and obviously stayed in touch, and I would consider them dear friends of mine at this point. And so when the song Only Love Can Save Me Now came around and I had finished writing that, it was one of the last songs we recorded for the album, but I had been working on it kind of throughout, and when I finally finished it, I called Matt and I called Kim, and I sent them a demo of it, and I was like, hey man, is this something that you would want to lend your voices to? Like, would you want to be a part of this? Would you want to play on this? Because my joke was, I was like, dare I say it has a very Soundgarden-esque vibe to it, and if you guys don't play on it, I'm just going to sound like I'm ripping you off. So, so I mean, that's my joke, but they heard it and they said absolutely, and it was just an incredible experience. And we actually recorded it in Seattle. We flew there and we recorded at London Bridge Studios, which is where Soundgarden recorded Louder Than Love back in the day, and Pearl Jam made 10, and Alice in Chains made Dirt, and like just so many amazingly iconic albums and recordings have been made there. So to walk into that space and into that studio. I'm a very firm believer that, places are kind of like people. They have memories, and they hold all of that energy in the walls. And I think that, that studio kind of proved me right. When you walked in, like, the walls were just bleeding this kind of, I don't know, excitement and energy that you can't really describe. And to be there, not just to be there, but to be there with Matt and Kim, creating something new after everything we'd all gone through, just, I don't want to speak for them, but for me, it felt like a very, very full circle moment. And it was just a really, really beautiful experience. And it's one of my favorite songs on the album by far. Like, it's one of my proudest accomplishments as a musician. And just, I mean, I can't describe it. I mean, to hear that, when you write something, I knew that they would add, an element that, is unmatched. I already knew that, but to hear it come to life in real time for the first time was just indescribable. I mean, the first time Matt hits his snare and the first note that Kim plays, the whole song just lit up and came to life. And it's one of my favorites. It's the coolest thing ever.
And then you've also got that iconic collab with Tom Morello as well. It is like such an iconic album for collabs. You've got, Soundgarden and Tom Morello on an album. Like, that is insane. I wondered how it was for you working with Tom and how you initially reached out to him. Was it like, did you go into studio together, or was it online?
We did it separately at the time, but Tom, and that came about because Tom and I have known each other for quite a few years now at this point, but we really reconnected at the Chris Cornell I'm the Highway tribute show in Los Angeles a few years back, because we were both playing with Soundgarden on the song Loud Love. So that's really where we kind of rebonded, or whatever you want to call it. And shortly after that, is when I started recording the album, and I had this song, and so it went, and just due to the lyrical content of the song and kind of the overall vibe and energy of it, I couldn't hear it without hearing Tom playing a solo on it. I mean, he has such a unique voice with his guitar. Like, that's my favorite thing about musicians, and especially iconic ones like Kim and Matt and Tom, is that they have such a distinct and unique voice with what they do that when you hear a Tom Morello guitar solo, you're not going to accidentally mistake it for someone else. Like, it sounds like a human voice. And I felt like his sound in particular on that song would really take the song to the next level. So kind of the same thing. I sent him a demo of it and said, would you want to play on this? And he said, yeah. And so when he sent back his tracks, when he put it all together, it did exactly what I thought it was going to do. It just like explodes into Tom Morello awesomeness, like right at the perfect moment. So,
it's
Tom. Thanks,
yeah.
man.
I mean, it's Tom Morello, so he's rock legend. Anything he touches turns to gold.
Exactly.
So in that track, and so when you said in an interview with Planet Rock that it comments on the state of civil unrest in the world, which I think is absolutely relevant, especially with all the events that happened in 2020, spewing into 2021, especially with the current political climate, the recent inauguration. I wondered, are you hopeful for the future? Are you hopeful for 2021 in the future, and just what's to come next?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm always hopeful. I think that's got a little hippie in me. So I think I'm always, maybe it sounds naive, but I think that, peace, love, and understanding and compassion are things that, as a society we need to focus on. And I am very hopeful for change, and the world will start to right itself, and we'll get back on track, and not only be back to where we were, but be in a better state of living than we were before the pandemic. That's my hope, is that everyone can really just start to come together and move forward in the most positive way possible. And I think that that's still going to require a lot of patience. I think that's what 2020 and beginning of 2021 has certainly taught me. It's taught me to be patient, on a shallow side of things, because I don't want to get too deep into politics here, but on a shallow side of things, it's like, we all miss concerts. I miss playing live. Like, it's been way too long. I feel it's very, very bizarre putting out new music and not being able to play it live. Like, that's just, it's crazy. But at the same time, concerts aren't gone forever. Like, we just have to do our part, be patient, and eventually they'll come back. And, my joke is that when they do, it's like tantric sex. Like, we've been deprived of them for so long. When they come back, they're just going to explode. It's going to be bigger and better than ever. So just everyone stay patient. And everyone, if we collectively work on healing, I think that we'll get to a much better place than, we started off at.
I was going to ask you about what it was like recording in the pandemic, because I can imagine it's been a lot different for you. I wondered if you ever considered stopping writing music during this pandemic because of how crazy it is right now for, having the access to studio, being able to perform these songs live, and even understand if your audience like the songs or not.
I don't think I've ever considered stopping writing music in my life, but I have considered stopping because I've actually had too much to say. And because, Death by Rock and Roll is just now finally coming out, I had to kind of put a mental block up of like, Taylor, don't go down the path of the next record yet, because as soon as you start to do that, then this one's going to, quickly fade into the background. And I don't want that. Like, I'm very, very proud of this record, and I'm still very in that. So I almost had to, I'm still jotting down ideas, and I'm always writing and things, but I literally had to kind of stop myself at one point and go, don't do that yet. Like, you're not there yet. But I have, I've learned like I said, I've learned to record at home, and just trying to see kind of the positive side of things. Like, even though we can't, tour right now and go around the world and plug in and play in front of an audience, the pandemic has brought on some very kind of interesting opportunities and I think some very beautiful collaborations and things that wouldn't, if we weren't in the situation, wouldn't exist. For example, like I did The Keeper with Elaine Johannes. He recorded in Chile and I recorded in Maine, and we put that together. And I think that turned out really beautiful. Or Halfway There with Matt Cameron, or most recently I just did a Quicksand with Mike Garson for a David Bowie tribute. So lots of, and then, kind of stripped back versions of our own songs, which had been something that I was thinking about doing for a long time. Like, the piano version of House on a Hill was something that I'd wanted to accomplish for years and just never got around to doing. So things like that if we were in the normal kind of grind of tour of, the album comes out and then we're going around the world, none of that would have come to fruition and it wouldn't have existed. So I've just been trying to stay very creative and just as positive as possible throughout lockdown, and appreciate, the fact that I'm here and then the time I have, and, appreciate the little things.
No, I totally agree with you, especially just in how much I miss concerts. I miss them so much. I don't know what I'm going to do when I get back into a mosh pit, truly. I think I'm going to explode, just fall to pieces, because I'm 5'3". I will get knocked out. I'm so ready for it.
That's awesome. No, I know. Believe me, I miss like the sweat and the lights and the, that immediate kind of connection that you feel with the fans where you're all like one in the moment. Like, no, I'm dying for it. I feel it's, playing live is like a drug, and I feel like I'm going through withdrawal, but it'll come back and, it'll happen. It's not gone forever. It's something I keep telling myself, and I keep reiterating in interviews, because I want to remind the world that too, like, just everyone be patient and it will come, and it'll all be good. It will all be good eventually.
I wanted to touch on, this might make you feel a bit old, I'm sorry if it does, but it's been 10 years since your debut, Light Me Up. And in that 10 years, so much has changed in the music industry and in the world. I wondered, especially as we talk about, women in iconic collaborations and women in the industry, how has it changed for you in the past 10 years being a woman in rock and metal?
In one way, it feels like nothing's changed at all. And then in the other way, it feels like everything's changed. I feel like it's kind of the same thing as time. Like, I feel like in one way I feel like I've lived 100 years, and some days I feel like I'm 2 years old again. So I think it kind of depends on the day when you ask me that question. But I think that, I don't know, when we first started the band, I was told all the time that, there was sexism in rock and roll, and that there was, a lot of misogyny and this boys club. And, you hear that story a lot. And I never really noticed it. I think I was kind of in denial about it for a long time. Cause I had my own things to overcome at the time that didn't, to me, I just saw it as like, I live on a bus with a bunch of guys. We're all doing the same thing. We're all traveling together. We're all playing music. We're all, on the same sleep schedule and the same press, we're all doing the same thing. So I don't really know what you're talking about. I don't feel any different. And I think as I've gotten older and kind of stepped away from it for a minute, I've noticed that there's some truth to that. There is sexism, there is misogyny, there is an element of, girls aren't allowed type thing. But I don't think that I felt it to the extreme that other artists have. I think that slowly, hopefully, I think that, over the course of time, like I think if you asked Amy from Evanescence about this, she started her band much earlier than me. And I think that she would probably have a completely different perspective than I do. But because I think that it has grown. I mean, there's much more female fronted bands than there were, 10 years ago. And I think that that's really cool to see. But at the same time, I've never looked at music from a sex point of view. Like, I just don't see it like that. Not just rock and roll, but any kind of music. Like I see it as a good song is a good song. And I don't care if it's a man singing it or a woman singing it. Like that doesn't even enter my brain. Like growing up, all my idols were men, not because they were men, just because they wrote the best songs. Like it was John Lennon and Paul McCartney and Chris Cornell and, and Robert Plant. And, I can go down the list, but none of them happen to be women. And so I get asked that a lot. And I feel like I'm betraying my own sex or something, that I don't have like female idols, but I really don't. I have a lot of, there's women that I respect, but they're not necessarily people that I look up to. And so I don't really know. I kind of just went off course there, but I think, I don't know. I think that it is interesting to, everything's always changing. And I think especially right now we're living in such a transitory state of, it's almost like not even just in the music world, but just the world in general. I mean, it's almost like we're living in the 60s again of, just this revolution and this renaissance. And if you can get past all the negative aspects of what's going on in the world for a second and try to see it, like look ahead 50 years. Like 50 years from now, people are going to be looking back at this time going, man, I wish I lived then. Like that was the time to be alive. Cause I always used to say, I wish I lived in like the 60s or the 70s. I felt like I was born in the wrong decade. But now we're kind of in that. We're in the new version of that, of this renaissance. And if you look at it from that kind of perspective, I think that it's a really cool time to be alive. And it's really, it's a really inspiring thing to be a part of.
No, I agree. It feels like we're in a history book, a history book. Yeah. Like in 20 years, people are going to learn about exactly what we're going through right now, which is really crazy to think about, but it's our reality, I guess. You kind of hit the nail on the head. That's exactly what I'm saying. It's totally trippy if you think of it like that, but it is. And in reality, it's actually quite cool to be a part of. Mm. So with 10 years of your debut album, Light Me Up, I wondered, did you have any plans for touring with it before the pandemic? Were you going to do an anniversary tour? Anything to do with that before the dreaded pandemic?
Not specifically on Light Me Up, but I mean, we still play all those songs live, and honestly, they're still some of my favorite ones to play live. Like going back to the first record, it brings me so much joy. It was such a great time in my life. Like if I think back on the memories of making that album, it was just, it was exhausting because I was working a lot at the time. So I had like 4 jobs and I didn't sleep much, but aside from that, it was just, I felt like it was the first time in my life that I was really in the right place at the right time and doing something that really genuinely made me happy. And I could see my future. I could like see the trajectory of, not necessarily success or anything like that, but I could see my life starting to kind of unfold in front of me. And it was just really, really exciting time period in my life. So not specifically a Light Me Up reunion tour or what, I don't know, not a reunion, but a, anniversary tour, but we certainly had touring plans. Death by Rock and Roll was supposed to be out and, or coming out. And we were we had some of the coolest touring of our career lined up. I mean, it was like Guns N' Roses and the Foo Fighters and Pearl Jam and all the festivals, and it had been a minute since we had been on the road, so we were certainly looking forward to it. And now we're just, in the same boat as everyone else, playing the waiting game. And I don't think any of it's actually canceled. I think everything is just continually getting pushed and pushed and pushed. So that's something to look forward to.
I know, when everything opens up again, it's going to be like a backlog, like 2 years of backlog, and it's going to be concerts back to back, which sounds fun in like, in your mind. It's like, woo, concerts every day, but reality, it's going to wear musicians out. You guys are going to be tired.
Oh yeah, it's going to be, I think there's probably going to be like, it's going to be fighting over like, there's only there's a limited amount of buses, and there's a limited amount of like, plane flights and everything. Like bands are going to be duking it out for the prime,
like a battle of the
prime traveling conditions. I don't know, just making that up.
Battle of the bands for who can tour.
Yeah, exactly. So we're going to have to argue over who gets to tour when
we get to tour, I guess, because I thought we were going to come back in 2021, and that's just not happened.
No, I mean, we still it's kind of consistent. I mean, at this point, it's just been like, we have a tour booked for 6 months from now, and then 6 months it comes around, they go, nope, okay, that's pushed for another 6 months. Now it's pushed another 6 months. And, I think technically we still have shows on the books for June, but the last phone call I had is that's not, realistically, that's not happening. So,
Death by Rock and Roll coming out February 12th. I'm sure you get asked this all the time, but what do you want for that album this year? Given that the pandemic is already going to stop touring, what is your goal for that album? When are you going to be like, this is cool, I'm happy with how this is done?
Well, I'm already happy with how it's done. I mean, the album's finished, so I wouldn't be releasing it if I wasn't happy with it. I wouldn't. So, I feel like I've already succeeded, I guess, in a lot of ways, because I really, the way I view success is when I've created something that I'm really proud of. And it's, and then all you can hope from, when kind of like I said earlier, once you put it out into the world, all you can hope is that just people give it a chance. That's all I can ask for, is that like, give it a chance to listen to it from front to back. Cause maybe, if you don't like the first song, maybe you like the fifth song, maybe like just I really feel like there's something for everyone on this record. And if you give it the opportunity to actually delve into it, you might be surprised, and you might find something that can really connect to you in a way that maybe you weren't expecting.
Well, thank you for joining me, Taylor, on Enemies in Conversation series. As I said, your new album comes out February 12th. It's available everywhere. Thank you, everybody, and goodbye.
Cool. Thanks.